Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I want to welcome our guests from the Jackson metro area and the Mississippi Delta, along with our friends here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But this is a show that celebrates the amazing people who are working so hard in the trenches to build a great Mississippi. And one of the things I love about this show, the over 1,100 conversations that we've had over the past a little more than 4 years, has been that we've been able to talk to such a wide variety of people who are just volunteers working in the trenches, don't want any recognition, don't want anyone talking about them. They just kind of want to do their thing in the trenches and make their contribution. It's great to talk to those people, incidentally, because you get an understanding of what's guiding them. And there are so many selfless servants across Mississippi that are doing amazing work. You've got your formal nonprofits, and we talk to the heads of those organizations as well. But you got these people that are, there's always going to be gaps. After Hurricane Katrina, we learned that really well, that all the organizations, whether they're governmental organizations or nonprofits, they're all working hard to fill the gaps, but there's still going to be gaps where volunteers go in there and they kind of find their purpose and they fill that gap. And I love telling their stories. We talk about entrepreneurs, so many great entrepreneurs, major economic development efforts, whether we're talking about the Golden Triangle area or maybe we're somewhere in the Hattiesburg region or on the Mississippi Gulf Coast talking about these economic engines. We try to give you a good flavor of all those things. And then we'll have conversations with, like, my friends Steve Azar or blues musicians from the Mississippi Delta to kind of keep us grounded in what this great culture that is Mississippi that has influenced the world. That is for sure. But every now and then we get to have a conversation with a leader, a political leader, a mayor. I love talking to mayors because, the rubber hits the road when you talk about what happens locally. And I have great friendships as a result of the show and just because of my connection to the community with so many mayors and have so much respect for them. And today we're going to have a conversation with someone that I've really actually been looking forward to having a deeper conversation with him since I first met him at the Mississippi Municipal League a couple of years ago. And his name is Toby Barker, and he's the mayor of Hattiesburg. And he's got a fascinating story. He's a great leader. I've studied this guy. I like what I see, and I think you will like what you see too when you get to know him better. So, without any further ado, let me welcome Mayor Toby Barker back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Toby?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
It's good. So, yeah, I'm assuming you're sitting in your office in City Hall?
I am. Yes.
Yeah, well, good. Southern Miss, man. Southern Miss.
Yeah,
it's a big part of your life, isn't it?
Yes, I credit for growing up in Meridian and then having a chance to move to Hattiesburg and go through, college and grad school here, and then loving it so much that I stayed in Hattiesburg. I mean, I really credit Southern Miss for really everything because it got me to Hattiesburg.
Pi Kappa Phi.
Yes, we were a relatively new fraternity when I pledged in 2001, and I guess we're about to celebrate our 25th anniversary of our chartering at Southern Miss, and so it was a great experience, not only as an active but also chapter advisor for about 10 years, and it's a great culture there and a great group of guys.
Yeah, it really is. You may actually remember my son Jordan Matthews.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Jordan had a great experience.
Doing well as an attorney now.
He's doing very well as an attorney now. He graduated second in his class from Ole Miss. Had a great education at Southern Miss, and he's my hunting and fishing partner. He's one of my best. He's literally my best friend, my son. It's great to have that kind of a relationship with your son. But I'm proud of my kids. All my kids did well. My daughter got 3 degrees from the University of Southern Mississippi. My son, Justin, unfortunately, because of our friend Dave Dennis, was introduced to Auburn along the way, and he fell in love with Auburn, went on to Auburn, and he got an undergraduate degree in engineering and then a master's in finance, and he got an MBA. He works in New York City now for Price Waterhouse, and he'll be a big city guy, I think, for the rest of his life. He loves coming home, but he loves the big city life. But he's the only one in the family that decided to branch out. Otherwise, the rest of us my wife and I and the rest of us got great educations from Southern Miss. But, Hattiesburg, you look at that area of our state, it's not always on everyone's radar screen. You tend to think of Hattiesburg as being the University of Southern Mississippi, and lots of amazing things have happened there. Joe Paul, I have deep respect for Dr. Joe Paul. He's a good friend. But the region has done really well over the past few years, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think if you go back the last 10 to 15 years, all but a handful of those, the metro area has been number one in job creation with some of the lowest unemployment. We tend to be growing with every census. Lamar County, I think, is the second fastest growing county in the state. Forest County is at number 9 or number 10. And really, it's a region where 40% of our population is below the age of 40. And which bodes well for our future growth. And it's a region with so much talent, not only with Southern Miss, but also William Carey, now the largest medical school in the state, with Camp Shelby, with Forest General Hospital, with Merit Health Wesley, Hattiesburg Clinic. There are a lot of just engines that keep the whole economy going, even when the national economy may be sputtering. And our job is to try and focus on public safety and livability and quality of life, while also trying to keep that job growth going and just keep the city and the region advancing.
Toby, it's you mentioned William Carey because oftentimes it just kind of over here a little bit out of sight, out of mind. You think of what they've done here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It's incredible. In fact, I actually have been invited to have lunch next Monday with some leaders from William Carey. And we're just going to talk about, connecting in coastal Mississippi, and they're very interested in hearing my perspective about who they should be connecting with. They have some new leaders there, so I had to jump on the opportunity to do that because really they're dead serious about not only the Hattiesburg campus but the Coast campus and how those two fit together and complement each other. They've got great leadership there, as you well know, and they're growing in ways that can serve the economic needs of our community. I mean, that's when you grow in that way, when you understand where are the jobs, where are the needs,
Yep.
what do we need to do, you can have success. And that's the strategic approach that they're taking, isn't it?
Well, Ben Burnett is, and following a visionary like Tommy King. I mean, Ben Burnett was a former Lamar County superintendent when I was in the legislature, and then went on to be the dean of education and then executive vice president, now president. I think that the secret sauce for William Carey is being able to spot, like you said, a gap in the workforce and being able to quickly set up a program that can meet that need. And they're very nimble, being a private institution and having a lot of support behind them through the Mississippi Baptist Convention and just a pool of donors really all over the world. And just seeing just that medical school in the 10 to 15 years that it's been in existence, going from a new start all the way to the largest medical school, it regularly, annually ranks in U.S. News and World Reports as number 1 or number 2 in terms of being able to place doctors in rural areas. I mean, it really is a fascinating thing. And when we talk about Hattiesburg, we are a 2-university town, and even throwing in Pearl River Community College. I mean, you've really got sort of the pre-K all the way through, upper level university, postdoctoral, as far as a culture that continually breeds new talent.
Yeah, Dr. Burnett is also a gifted musician. And
yes, he is.
I grew up in a family of musicians. I played drums and bang on the piano a little bit, so we were able to connect on that point. Just a really good drummer. But yeah, I mean, it's not unusual to find someone in a position like that who is multi-talented, and certainly he's that kind of guy. But yeah, I enjoy. I think your point about them being nimble is really important. And listen, I don't want to take any focus away from Southern Miss, because at the same time, under Dr. Joe Paul's leadership, Southern Miss is serious. I mean, they're very serious.
Yeah, and I think everyone was just so excited to see him finally get the opportunity to lead that university. I mean, he is a tireless worker. He is in a different high school multiple times a week. And I think the name of the game right now for Southern Miss is continued student recruitment and retention. And I think we're on track for a really good freshman class this fall. And I think Dr. Paul is putting a team around him, and especially in the student affairs, student life area, that can really help retain the students that we're bringing in and be sort of be kind of a destination that people in South Mississippi, South Louisiana, Alabama have in terms of being, punching above our weight, always trying to go for a little bit more, walking around with a chip on our shoulder, because it just means we try harder. And I think that the idea of Southern Miss grit that Dr. Paul talks about all the time is embedded in each and every alumnus.
I can't agree more. I got that. I got that sense of, be a fighter. I love the term dogged determination, which to me is a way to express that Southern Miss grit, but a real dogged determination to make a difference and to make sure that the university is strategically focused in a way that can enable it to grow, contribute to your region, and, most importantly, have students that are coming out ready to go tackle the world. I mean, that's really important. And it takes all these things, all these different schools and all the research capabilities and the athletic programs and all these things working together with a region like the Hattiesburg area. That's how you find success. Hey, when we come back on the other side, as we continue our conversation with Mayor Toby Barker from Hattiesburg, we're going to take a step back a little bit. I'm curious about where his motivations for wanting to make a difference in the community, where does his values come from? I want to go back even further than Southern Miss and see who influenced him as he was growing up in his life. We'll continue the conversation when we come back after this break. Well, welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I have the mayor of the city of Hattiesburg, Toby Barker. He went to the University of Southern Mississippi, got a degree in communications. He got a master's in economic development, and then he went on to Brown University and got a master in healthcare leadership. Was your intention, Toby, to actually get into the healthcare arena at one point?
Yeah, I think when I was first and second term lawmaker, health policy was kind of my niche, and at that point, I thought I was just going to be a lifelong legislator because I really liked the process, as frustrating as it can be sometimes, and had become pretty adept at it. And so, it was either go to law school, run for something else, or I saw a degree program which was healthcare leadership at Brown. Kind of a blended program where you go to Rhode Island for a few weeks and then you do some online, but it was kind of like a health MBA mixed with a health policy degree. And my thesis was on potential Medicaid expansion plans for the state of Mississippi back in 2014, which has become very relevant, I guess, this year. And so just that's kind of what led me to do that, and in hopes that, if I ever got out of public life, that there would be a good fallback there in terms of some kind of health consulting.
Listen, we don't have time to get into it, and I'm not even going to drag you into a conversation about Medicaid expansion, but the politics of it bother me, because I think what we should do in this state is, at least we're having the conversation, and so that's an important thing right there, because we have been unwilling to have the conversation for all these years. We're having the conversation, and that is a positive step. So I don't want to lose sight of that reality. But the polarizing aspects of politics gets involved when you start talking about something like Medicaid expansion, when the conversation really should be about the healthcare challenges we're having in Mississippi. It's 51% of Mississippians live in rural areas, and you've got healthcare facilities closing, so many that are on the edge that are serving entire regions, like Greenwood Hospital, for example, where I spend a lot of time. I have a place up in the Mississippi Delta. And the reality is that we're not we should be having it. The way I've discussed it in the past is like Hurricane Katrina hits. We did an all points on deck, and we looked at every aspect of it, and then we developed plans from that, and we've had success in the recovery effort as a result of that. And so I hate that we jumped into just a singular discussion about Medicaid expansion and not a broader discussion about how can we re-engineer the challenges that we're facing in Mississippi, and then what role can Medicaid expansion play in achieving some of the goals that come out of an effort like that. But politics get involved, and it's people Obamacare us to death, and trying to stop people from at least having the debate and the discussion. So I just say that. You can comment whatever you want to say about that, but at the end of the day, I think it's at least a positive step that we're having the conversation. Any comment about that?
Well, I think that, the idea is you want better health outcomes where people can live a good life, take care of their family, and having access to health care, and thus having quality health care. I mean, it's all about, quality cost access. And so, that should be what drives the discussion. But I get that Medicaid expansion is not the end all be all, but it's a pretty important part when you're talking about giving access to a couple 100,000 people. And I think that for so long, the conversation was stifled and I think the state was wise in taking a year or two to see what other states did. But eventually, you get 8 years down the road where we are now, or a decade down the road, and now we're finally having it. And it's a conversation that should have been happening the entire time, but people were even afraid to even utter the words or didn't understand it. And the difference you have this year is that you have a great health care mind in House Speaker Jason White. He handled that Medicaid bill before he became Speaker Pro Tem in 2020. I mean, he handled that Medicaid technical bill each and every time from when he was a freshman lawmaker to now. He understands the issue. He understands the dynamics. My successor, Missy McGee, handled that bill on the floor. And I think that she said it perfectly when, yes, there are going to be benefits economically. Yes, there are going to be, benefits to failing or institutions that may be going under because of just the healthcare model has changed. And yes, there are concerns about how many people are coming on the rolls and all that. But sometimes you need to do the right thing because it's the right thing. And if our goal was better health outcomes, we have to understand that Medicaid expansion, in whatever form it takes, is a part of that conversation. And simply saying no is not a viable solution and is not a path forward.
Well, but you mentioned Ms. McGee. Her leadership on this has been terrific. And I watched the hit she was taking politically for just being a transformational leader and pressing forward and something. See, this is the kind of thing. It's complicated, Toby. You know this better than most. I mean, you've been educated in this area, and you've been you were a legislature for and the Mississippi legislature for a long period of time, and you get how these issues play out. But you can't. This is one where you can't learn how it could help us in this state. You can't. It's not just about helping the individuals that need it, but it's about the healthcare institutions that are having all these services, unfunded services. Once you start to sort of break the seal on that, Gerard Gibbert likes to say that every legislature should have to go to UMMC, neonatal intensive care unit, to really appreciate what happens when you have a bad healthcare system in a state. And you're right, we got to be more focused on healthcare outcomes. It's an all-encompassing thing, but I think she did a great job of pressing it forward, and was unfortunately took too many political hits for being a transformational leader. But that's what sometimes to be a transformational leader, you have to be willing to have tough skin and take the licks. And
I think that whether it's and I will say this, that she may have taken hits on Twitter from some sides, but she's immensely popular in our city and ran unopposed last time for being how she is. I think that whether it's this controversial issue or PERS or go to the federal government and how do we balance our budget, I think the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And if we could get out of our foxholes and actually have grown-up conversations and decide, hey, we're going to show political courage, we're going to get in the arena, we're going to do things, we're going to move the ball forward. I think that we could be in a totally different place as a country and a state, and I think that we will get there as a state with under the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Hoseman and Speaker White. But I think back in the late '90s when I was, I guess, coming of age and as a teenager, and you saw that Speaker Gingrich and President Clinton had to figure out a way to a balanced budget, but by God, they did it. And that's something. And the idea that how do we in this environment get back to a balanced budget that probably depends on entitlement reform, probably depends on defense spending. I mean, all of it together can get us there. But I don't think you have the appetite among lawmakers who are simply living for the next election.
Everything's a political calculus. And as you and I well know, the polarizing ends are determining the debate where most people are in the middle. Look, the people that I engage with, they may describe themselves as a Democrat or they may describe themselves as a Republican, but when you understand where they are in the issues, you start to understand that they're really moderate. Whether you can say a moderate Democrat or a moderate Republican, they're somewhere in the middle. I think most Mississippians are actually somewhere in the middle. The polarizing ends too often are defining what the conversations need to be, and that makes it so difficult. When everything we do is a political calculus and not about let's go solve a problem. And we got to quit worrying less about getting reelected and more about solving problems. If we can find that place again, I do believe those leaders are out there, Toby. I mean, I do. You were a Republican in the legislature for a long period of time. You're an independent as a mayor. I bet that served you really well, actually, as a mayor, hasn't it?
Well, I think it takes away the stigma that some people immediately associate you with one side or the other. And as I had an old councilman friend who was the dean of students at Southern Miss, Dr. Eddie Holloway. There's no Republican or Democratic way to pick up garbage or or patch potholes. I mean, you have to solve problems on a regular basis, and I think that we certainly bring our philosophies to the table, but we're not constrained by them when it comes time to just finding common ground.
Yeah, you and I chatted a little bit before the show started about Haley Barbour. I had the opportunity to work closely with him on the Governor's Commission after Katrina, the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal, and had the honor of writing the foreword to his book, America's Great Storm. But and he's been on the show a couple of times, and when he talks about his time in the Reagan White House and being present and observing President Reagan and Tip O'Neill have a drink at the end of the day, and these guys who were really sparring during the day, at the end of the day, they kind of liked each other. And one of the things that Haley said was one of the problems in Washington today is that most of the legislators don't live there. They're going home at the end of the session on a weekly basis. And when they lived there, they tended to spend more time together. And the more time you spend together, even if you're on opposite ends of the spectrum politically, you have more respect for one another. And we've lost that in the political calculus. And unfortunately, too often that also kind of filters down to the state level. And it's just really unfortunate that we're there. As I mentioned to the mayor of the city of Hattiesburg, Toby Barker, when we got started, I never know where these conversations are going to go. But when we come back on the other side, we're going to do what I promised at the beginning of this segment. I actually want to know where his value system comes from. How does he decide to be an independent, and how has that really enabled his leadership in public service as a mayor? We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with Toby Barker, who's the mayor of Hattiesburg, and I enjoy having conversations with leaders like Toby because you just never know where the conversation is going to go. But his time in the legislature is so valuable. I mean, he worked with so many important committees. Again, he went on to get a degree from Brown University in a program that enabled him to spend some time there, some time here. I did a program similar to that at Northwestern University. And so anyway, he's a thoughtful guy. He's a good leader for Mississippi. And I want to take a step back for just a little bit. We've talked a little bit about where he came from and his time at University of Southern Mississippi, the fact that he spent some time in the legislature, et cetera. But I'm actually interested in learning sort of where your inspiration for public service came from. I mean, talk to me about your leadership style and what motivates you and sort of where that came from.
I think, like everyone, you learn from doing. And I grew up in Meridian and had a grandfather who was very soft-spoken, but just meant the world to me, and went off to World War II with that generation, saved the world, came back and was just a pillar of his community. He worked until he was 65, retired, and then went to visiting nursing homes and sang in the choir at church and never voted, but never was politically involved. And and my mom and dad always encouraged me to get involved. But I think you just learn from the people that you're fortunate to kind of follow along with. And for me, it was Dr. Joe Paul at Southern Miss that encouraged me in student government. And then I was fortunate enough to be in the Baptist Student Union during my undergrad years and went on several mission trips and spent a summer in West Africa and some other short-term stuff. And just kind of, I knew through those experiences that I wanted to go into doing something to help better the quality of life for people. And I always thought I would end up in some third world country doing international development. And, Katrina happened and a lot of those plans got shelved, and ended up working for the university and which led me to the legislature. And so I've been fortunate just to have a lot of people that have always been real motivators to me, and either by their own example, whether it's Sonny Montgomery or mean, Roger Wicker, Haley Barber, Judge Gene Fair, but then also people that invested in me, like John Reed, Herb Frierson, even Steve Holland, Jessica Upshaw, former representative from Hancock County. I mean, all of those folks were just really poured into me time, and I'm the product of a lot of people's time, and I'm very fortunate for that.
It's cool to look back and think about who influences you. And, the more you contemplate something like that, when you're in a position like you're in today, having collaborated with so many different people in so many different ways, whether it be in the legislature at Southern Miss or whatever, the list can get long, can't it, Toby?
Yeah. And I guess the challenge now is, as busy as we often find ourselves in elective office, I mean, I value getting to go to schools and doing youth councils, and because I hope that, that I can be, I mean, in some way, motivation for someone else to consider public service as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, in studying you, one of the things that I came to appreciate about you is that you really do understand the value of collaboration, in building partnerships and engaging the community. Did you sort of understand that when you became the mayor? Is it something that you've kind of learned on the ground that, first of all, you've got a gift to do it, but you came to appreciate how important it was?
I think the legislature teaches you a lot when you're having to get to 62 votes, and keep in mind, my first term, we were in the minority. And so you had to go to Democratic chairman because that's all there were. And you had to say, I'm willing to work. And Steve Holland was one of the best teachers in how you assemble a coalition of people around something. And I handled legislation that a freshman had no business handling, because he allowed me to do that and then was there to save me when I was about to make a real mistake. But I think the thing I'm proudest of is the work on the Early Learning Collaborative Act with Bryce Wiggins. And that was a hodgepodge of groups that you had to somehow get on the same page to get. I mean, that was a 3/5 vote. And we managed to get, over 90 votes in the House, and he did well in the Senate and got that bill into law, which is now, I think, one of the strongest pre-K in terms of quality laws in the country. But I mean, I also realize that in a city like Hattiesburg, it's a very diverse city. I mean, it is majority minority. There are a lot of differing political views beyond just the different ethnicities. You've got very liberal folks, you've got very conservative folks, but all of them share this idea that Hattiesburg should be this thought leader and should be a leading city in the Gulf South. And so when we took office, I mean, the vision we put out there is premier city of the Gulf South. That's what we want to be. And whether it was, getting our school bond issue passed and then, taking a D district to an A district, or getting the 1% tax passed for Southern Miss athletics and Parks and Rec for the city. I mean, you have to assemble something where everybody gets something and everybody can see progress for their organization, their cause, their neighborhood, and it's a lot of effort. But I think it's the only way to govern.
Yeah, it is. I talk to leaders about this on the coast all the time. Coast, it's a collection of cities, all these 15 municipalities, 3 county seats. You know how this works. If you're going to be successful on a regional level, you've got to communicate like crazy. You're talking about 113 elected positions. Think about that for a second. Think about the amount of time. Well, I'm telling you to think about it, and that's what you do. But to make a region like Coastal Mississippi tick, you got to be willing to, you got to dive in deep. You got to build great relationships. You got to build trust. You got to learn to disagree on this issue, but love him on the next issue. You can't let it be personal. There's a lot of dynamics to that. Well, I'm not saying that Hattiesburg is that complicated, but when you're talking about bringing coalitions together and communicating with all the different elected officials you got to be dealing with and all the constituencies you have to be dealing with, you got to be willing to put tremendous amount of time in communication, don't you?
And you're right. And I think that the times that we are most successful is when we're putting that time in. And, we sit in 2 counties, and the bulk of our residents live in Forest County, but the majority of our sales tax is in Lamar County, and you have to bridge two very differing views of what the city of Hattiesburg should be in those two things. Whether it's a neighborhood redevelopment plan or I think in citizen engagement and just spending the time to listen to people. The times that I've fallen on my face have been times that I have assumed and tried to push forward without going to the people and getting all stakeholders on board.
You alluded to it a few minutes ago about a lot of efforts. It's a multidimensional effort, strategic effort to make that region strong. And what I came to appreciate about the work that you've done with a lot of dedicated community service, I might add, it's not just you; it's a big group of people working together. And that's the point that we're making. And it's that what gets measured gets done. You've taken a very strategic approach to it. Okay, here's where we are now. Here's the data. This is jobs. This is the diversification and economic development. This is the role Southern Miss plays in that. There's the makeup of the demographics. I mean, the whole nine yards. You took a complete current process analysis, and then you began to understand. Okay, what could be? I mean, what is the possibilities here, and where are we doing well? How can we accentuate those? Where are some of the areas of weakness that we can shore that up a little bit? But you've really taken a point of view about what gets measured gets done. And the results are you're getting things done. And when you have success and you're able to point to metrics that really prove that point, then you can build off that for more success. There's a snowballing reality to it, isn't there?
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of it also is just telling your story, and which I think when we came in, we were a younger administration. I'm getting older by the day, but when I took office was 35, and we brought in. I have a great chief communications officer in Samantha McCain, and we really used the channels that were out there to just tell people what was happening in their city, what the challenges were in terms of financial, infrastructure, and I think people, as long as you keep them in the loop and you engage them and you make allowances for their questions and their concerns and their disagreements. I found that out a lot during COVID. People will go with you on some things, and I think there's a legacy that our city has. Of course, we're the hub city, and if you ever look at our logo, and I'll wrap this up real quick. There's a hub sign that points to all the cities, and we used to have a 60-foot sign that was lit up in downtown. And the night that was lit in 1912, there was a pastor who said it is the Hattiesburg spirit to go after things and get them, especially big things. And I think that is our legacy over 140 years now, is not being afraid to go after big things and bringing people along for the ride.
When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with the mayor of the city of Hattiesburg, Toby Barker. He mentioned COVID. I mean, a lot of learning there. Natural disasters, big tornadoes. So Katrina had a big impact on that area. Social challenges. There's so much there. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're talking to Mayor Toby Barker from the city of Hattiesburg. And this is kind of the way I wanted our conversation to go, Toby, as sort of a first conversation. I can't wait to have you back and even go deeper and just talk philosophically about things. I would enjoy doing that with you. But one of the things I wanted to be able to do is sort of layer who you are as a leader, because if people should, if they miss these key points in the conversation, he was in the legislature when Republicans didn't have the majority, and we all now know they eventually got the majority, and this is where we are today. But when you don't have the majority, it causes you to have to work across party lines, and frankly, when you have a small majority, you still have to work across party lines. And I think, we don't give ourselves enough credit in Mississippi. I can think of a lot of bills that I've seen recently that have had bipartisan support that really, it warms my heart to know that on some of these really complicated issues that we can get together in that way. So you were there at a time when you saw that transition happen, and there's a lot to say about that. You were there during the early term of Governor Haley Barbour. You were in leadership roles for Katrina, and when you experience these things, you learn valuable lessons, don't you?
Yeah, I think that just knowing how to deal with people that are not like you, but also knowing when to kind of sit back and just watch people. My colleague from East Hattiesburg, whose district borders mine, is Percy Watson, and he was elected 2 years before I was born. And he will, Lord willing, he will break the record for longest serving legislator in a couple of terms. And I sit there and watch him. He never gets emotional about things. He sits and observes. He writes in his journal religiously, and has since the mid '80s when he was there. And I think just every leader that you get to be around, you get to learn something from. And I've been fortunate to learn from a lot of them.
Again, Katrina did affect Hattiesburg in a big way. I remember looking at this aerial, a satellite view of Mississippi that Haley Barber used to show all the time, showing basically all of Mississippi dark in the day after Hurricane Katrina. But tornadoes. You've faced your share of challenges. You mentioned COVID-19 a few minutes ago, but the impact that COVID had on administering the work of a city was traumatic, and especially when you think about Southern Miss and the economic engine that it is. You become stronger when you have to deal with issues like that, don't you?
I think that it's a combination of learning to make decisions based on facts, and you really learn resilience. You also learn how to communicate with people about what your decision-making process is, because I think, especially during COVID, there were so many conspiracy theories, and I tried for us to be. We had briefings a couple times a week on social media. We tried to just give the facts and the numbers. We assembled a list of a regular Wednesday call of all the educational and healthcare institutions in our city, just to talk about what each other were dealing with, and we're able to kind of share information and share resources. I think you also just learn to make hard decisions, and there's a lot that I'll someday will unpack. But there were some really, really tough days, and but I think we're a stronger city, and we're a more capable administration that knows, I think, the soul of our city now because of that experience.
I think there's something I talk about it a lot on the show. I talked about it in the foreword to Haley's book. I wrote about it a lot after Hurricane Katrina. That when you're a leader in the community, having been published with the Sun Herald and then a leader in the recovery effort, what you view initially is, how in the world are we ever going to get through this? That's your initial thought, and then when that dogged determination that we talked about earlier starts to set in, then you realize that failure is not an option. You get moving. But one of the things that I've come to really appreciate, and I just get your thought about it as well. You mentioned resilience, but what is in the heart and soul of Mississippians is not, we can talk about it in this glowing kind of way, and others will say, well, we have resilience too. But man, Mississippians are resilient people, man. They don't take no for an answer. It's an amazing thing to watch when you see the challenges that you faced over your career. We have a way of overcoming adversity. We are resilient people, aren't we?
Well, and you're right. And I think back on just the seasons that our city has come through, even before I was mayor, whether it's Katrina or the 2 tornadoes, or we're having 2 police officers killed in the line of duty, or COVID, I think we have a knack, and I think Mississippi has a knack, that the best of ourselves show up when our backs are truly against the wall. And the challenge for us, I think, as a state is how do you take that spirit? How do you take that muscle and better exercise it when things are not going south on you?
Yeah.
Because and we saw it during 2020 when the legislature finally changed the flag. It was the best of ourselves showed up. And And I just think that if we would lean into that more a little bit, we would be in a different place.
I can't agree more. I can't wait to have you back on to talk more about that. And we'll get into some of the infrastructure improvements that you've made and economic development initiatives that you put in place and community programs and commitment to education and all the things that are important. But for this conversation, I wanted to put some layers on you as a leader, and we did a very sufficient job at that. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me today, Toby.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a blast.
It's been a pleasure. This has been the mayor of the city of Hattiesburg, Toby Barker. We'll look forward to having him back, and we'll get into some philosophical discussions. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and stay safe.